Welcome back, YouTubers. This is Inland Northwest Native News. I'm your host, Jeff Ferguson, and we are back for episode 14, and it's another great day to be Indigenous. If this is your first time here, we'd like to say lemlemsh, and thank you for joining us, and a quick shout out to our newest subscribers. Here at Inland Northwest Native News, we cover news and events of 11 tribes of the Inland Northwest, including the Spokane, the Kalispel, the Colville, the Coeur d'Alene, the Kootenai of Idaho, the Nez Perce, the Umatilla, Warm Springs, Yakima, Salish Kootenai, and the Blackfeet. Coming up in this episode, we're going to Santa Fe, New Mexico for an in-depth interview I did last year with the one and only living legend, Spokane Tribal member Charlene Teters. Charlene is an amazing Native woman. She's the former Dean of Students at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, and she tells us the story of how she got to work with Gay Kingman, Dennis Banks, Clyde Belcourt, and the National Congress of American Indians to lead the fight to change the mascots of the Cleveland Indians, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Atlanta Braves, and the Washington Redskins clear back in the late 80s and the early 90s. She gives us some first-hand insight of what it was like to be on the front lines of that fight with SWAT teams, the Department of Justice, and team owners 30 years ago, so be sure to check it out. If you're interested, I'd also like to invite you to join me and my co-host Margot Hill for our morning show 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 a.m. We'll be live streaming right here on YouTube to cover current and ongoing issues facing Indian country on a local, regional, and national level, so be sure to check that out. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them in the comment section below, and if you don't want to miss out on anything, be sure to like and subscribe to be notified of all of our upcoming episodes and live streams. So all right already, no more horsing around. Let's get right to Charlene in Santa Fe. Thanks again for joining us. Lemlemsh, she uhoy. For the most part, I just kind of wanted to be able to spend a little bit of time with you. We're here. It's a long ways to come, and we don't have a lot of interior Salish or Columbia Plateau tribal representation in this area. And for us to have any, really, because, per capita, if we look at our tribes aren't near what the Cherokee or, the larger Navajo, Dene, or any of those guys that have just massive tribes, 15 people on their tribal council or whatever, and it's like I just have a hard time expecting people from our neck of the woods to relate to that kind of just the whole Native experience. We have just a handful. I mean, there are more Dene language speakers that are fluent than we have in our entire tribe, and we're down to like a handful of indigenous language speakers in our tribe, and so it's just.
Is this rolling?
It's rolling.
Oh, okay.
We're on I try to roll as much as I can because, and that's usually how I get a good raw emotion, So I'm not sure where you want to start.
I'm gonna tell you a story about how Spokane ended up in Santa Fe. Anyway, I mean, I've been here a long time. I've been here so long that the governor of New Mexico, Gary Johnson, gave me an award for excellence in the arts as a New Mexico artist. And I'm like, wow, I've been here so long that they think I'm from here, So, so many people come and go from Santa Fe, and it is this art culture center. That was an interesting recognition, and it came from the Hauser family. They were looking for somebody to recognize, and they appreciated the combination of art and political activity, which my artwork now is very political. But how I ended up here is I was part of an artist group of sorts back home in Spokane. So I lived in the city of Spokane. That's where I grew up, but I also was on the Colville res. I was married to a Colville man. And that's when I kind of connected with, George Flett, George Hill. It was Michael Paul. It was Lawrence I'm getting the name wrong. Lawrence Aripa, that's it. Lawrence, and there were others that were part of that, but we were, artists that got together, we painted together, we drew together, we would rent a space at the Western Art Show that was in Spokane that I think still happens. So we encouraged each other, we critiqued each other's work. And at the time, it was great, to have these colleagues, from there. But I was going through a divorce, and in my divorce, I was the victim of domestic violence. So, and it became clear to even my colleagues that I was, the victim of domestic violence. And so, going to school to the Institute of American Indian Arts at that time was really not about getting an education. It was about getting out of town. It was about getting as far away from home as possible so that I could find a safe place for myself and for my kids. So that's how I ended up coming here. And the people who really encouraged me to make that journey was George Flett and Bruce Wynn, who, they're going like, if I could do it again, I'd definitely go back to IAIA. It's a place where you have community, and, George Hill told me that there was no other place other than at home where he felt at home. So that's all I needed to hear. So, I worked as a waitress and saved all my tip money. I always find this one story about my son who came across my tip. I had a jewelry box where I kept all my tip money. And so I was saving all my tip money in that box during the summer. And he came across it and he opened it up, and it just like these dollar bills flying in the air, and it had coins in there, and he's going like, wow, we're rich. So, but I had probably saved about $1,000, something like that, of my tip money, and that's what I used to make that journey here. It was enough to get gas and to get myself here, look for a place and stuff like that. So that's how I ended up here. And I didn't have the confidence at the time that I was even made for college. For me, it was just about getting out of town and getting into a safe situation. So the Institute at that time was a BIA school, and it was a 2-year program, and it was free. So it was tuition free. So I'm going like, yes, it's a place that I can afford to be. And with the tribal support, I was able to get an apartment, and it was great. It was like breathing room here. But I realized after being in school for like a semester that I can do this. This is something that I can do, because for me, student success was getting to the end of a semester. If I can stay for a semester, that's student success for me, right? If I can make it a year, that's pretty good. So for me, it was like just trying to get to the end of that class, to the end of that semester, to the end of that year. And through my experience as a student, I realized I could do this. I can succeed. I can be okay. And with each passing semester, I gained more confidence. And IA is kind of special in that it's one of those places where you're not the only You're not the only Spokane. Well, maybe I was the only Spokane, but you're not the only Native person in the classroom. You're not the only, Native person in the school. And we're surrounded by 19 pueblos. So it was one of those places where, you're not the minority. You're really surrounded by people who look like you. And you don't have to explain who you are and why. So there was something very comfortable about being here. And it felt safe for me. And so that was the beginning of my journey. So that was like 1984. And I've had a relationship with Santa Fe, ever since. So I got my 2-year degree in 2 years. I always tease my students about this. So I got my 2-year degree in 2 years. And I got my 4-year degree in 4 years. So from IAIA, I went to the College of Santa Fe and got my BFA. And I was recruited to the University of Illinois, where I got my MFA. So I was recruited along with 2 other Native people, so Norman Akers and Marcus Ammerman, to pursue an advanced degree at the University of Illinois. And so the work I was doing here, before I came, back up, before, I came to school here, I was a pretty accomplished painter before going to IA. So going to IA was not learning how to be a painter or learning how to be an artist, because I kind of had that with that core group of other Native artists. What I got here was something different, and that's a hard thing in some ways to explain, because getting my Associate of Fine Arts was that I could do the academic part, that I could come out with a certificate, I can come out with my associate's degree. And then to complete my BFA, in the 4 years, it was different, so going to school was not about learning how to be an artist, because I was already pretty accomplished. Some of the paintings, like the painting that's on the front of that magazine, that was like in my first year here at the Institute. I was already pretty accomplished. And I was really prolific. So I was doing paintings all the time. So when I was back home, I was painting constantly. And all my paintings were behind the door, because for me, it was a process. It wasn't really about making a thing that I was going to show. At first, it was just a process. Until, some of my colleagues, that core group of artists, saw my work. And they're going like, wow, you need to show this. So it's through them that I started to show my work. And people still tell me they have my work all over the Colville Res, because my former husband was Colville. And I cringe a little bit because I'm not sure what they have and how good it is. But they're always proud that they have it. I have one of your drawings. I have one of your paintings. So I was prolific. So it's all over there. I don't know how good it is. And they'll even describe it to me. They're going, and I have no memory of it really. When I was a student at IA, I didn't have enough money to buy a lot of canvases, so I was just painting one, and then I would get a grade for that, and then I would paint over that painting, and so I have many of those early works have many paintings on them. So if they ever figure out how to look through them and see them, there's like many paintings on them. And my instructors got really mad at me because I was painting over my paintings, so they're going like, what? Where is that one? What? You're painting on top of that? So they started to take them away from me. And they would give me another canvas, because they didn't want me doing that. So some of those paintings that are in the collection, which that blue painting that's on the cover of that magazine, that was one that was just taken from me. It actually has several paintings underneath it. So that's how I ended up here. And going to the University of Illinois is actually the beginning of when I became politicized. The skills that it takes to paint, I didn't really need a lot of direction. It's everything else, the gen ed that's part of your degree, right? So you have to take math and English and different kinds of things, philosophy, whatever. That's the part I didn't think I had in me, to do the academic work. So, and when I realized, I'm not stupid, actually, I can do this.
That's I had the same. I had the same thing. Mm-hmm. I didn't graduate from high school. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to college, I was 37, and I was like, I didn't know. My mom always told me, she always said something, I don't know if you knew her or not, but she used to tell me when I was a kid growing up, you're so smart, you could be an engineer. And I always remember thinking, why would I want to drive a train? I thought an engineer drove a train. I kept thinking that. But then, and it was later on when I got to college that I had that same kind of tipping point where I was like, maybe I can do this. I'm in a master's program now, and I still kind of am like, I always wondered if I could, and now I believe I can. I'm 10 credits shy. So,
well, I think that what we're describing is something that's common to Native students, Native people, is that we hear that voice in our head that says you can't do it, you're inferior, you are not as smart as, you're not as, that's that. And we all have that imposter syndrome. Even when we've completed everything and we're in line to go get our degree, right? We still think somebody's going to tap us on the shoulder and say, wait, no, not you, And I think that's probably a bigger discussion in terms of where that comes from. And I think that, we hear so much about who people think we are. And we spend so much time trying to correct the misinformation about who we are. And when you hear, you're a student in 5th grade or 6th grade, that you don't hear history from your point of view. It's always a massacre, or something, so they talk about us in the past tense. There's a lot that, impacts us as contemporary people that is about telling us that we're not quite as human as other people. And we spent a lifetime trying to undo this. And as educators, we're working with young people to make sure that they know they can do it. We're here to help you succeed, and you can do it. So even though I'm a little cocky about, I got my degree in my 2-year degree in 2 years. If it takes you 4 years, who cares? My daughter's actually quite brilliant, but her first attempt at college was terrible. She just crashed and burned, came home, and then when she decided, she had to figure out what it was she wanted to do. And when she figured that out, she was on a rocket to the moon, so she went and, like me, just got her degree, and went to her master's and then through her PhD program. And she's this incredible, I can't even believe she's my daughter, because I was at her PhD defense. All of it went over my head completely. But she's got her PhD in epidemiology. And what she really was looking at is how, racism impacts the quality of care that we get. So she was really looking at us as a people. So she was impacted by being in the household with me where I'm dealing with direct racism, when I went to the University of Illinois.
So kind of getting back to the University of Illinois, you said that's when your work became political. What year was that?
So let's see. 84 to 86. 86 to 88. Okay, so 88 to 91.
And do you know why or what it was that kind of led you in that direction?
Oh, sure. That's a whole new story.
Well, I mean, now we have Standing Rock and missing and murdered Indigenous women and opioids and man camps and all these different things that are happening now. And it's not that stuff wasn't happening then.
Yeah.
There's more of it that's come to light now. But what was it for you?
You really don't know? Okay. So, well, when I was recruited, I told you I was recruited along with 2 other Native people. So the 3 of us, all first generation, to go get an advanced degree. For us, it was a dream come true. First generation to pursue, a master's, and even within my family, not everybody graduated from high school. So for me, this was a dream come true, and for the other 2, Marcus and Norman Akers, all first generation. So this was a dream come true for the 3 of us to make this journey from Santa Fe to the University of Illinois, where they have as their mascot an Indian, a dancing Indian. And we didn't ask, oh, by the way, what's your mascot? When we were looking at a graduate program, we didn't ask that question. So what happened is we here are 3 Native people. We're not confused about who we are. We know who we are. We're very clear about our own history and who we are within our communities. And we, all 3 of us, went to the University of Illinois. And we saw in our community, which is, a very white, very... they're not middle classes. They're actually a little more prominent. It's just not Yale, but it's still a Big Ten school. And they were using as their athletic identity an Indian mascot. And so what was happening in the community is that they had the variations of the Indian mascot identity being played out within the community. So when we first got there, and this is common for Native students, when you get somewhere, you're looking for your community. Where are the other Native students? Is there a club of some sort? Is there a community? Is there a community center? Is there a Native house? Is there, so you start asking those questions and you start to realize, oh, we're the Native community. The 3 of us, we're the Native community, because there was no other Native people there, except for this Indian mascot that they were using. So this is, so when you have an Indian identity mascot being used in a community that has no Native presence, there's no real people there, then what ended up happening is that mascot was used as the platform for them to act out their fantasies about who they think we are, about their stereotypes about who they think we are. So for example, there was a sorority that had the Miss Illini Squaw contest. So the sorority kids would have these tryouts, and of course it was acting out what they think, so it was lusty, busty, very scantily clad, women trying out to be Miss Illini Squaw. And And then there was the fraternities who would put on paper headdresses to go to the local bar to act out their stereotype of who they think our men are. So, this permeated this community. So you couldn't go anywhere without seeing cartoon characters. There was a bar called Home of the Drinking Illini that had a falling down, in neon, falling down over and over again, drunk Indian. So he had a pot belly, he had buck teeth, he had a broken feather, he had an exaggerated big nose, and he was falling down drunk over and over again. And this is where the fraternity brothers would go and wear their headdresses to go get drunk, because they were acting out what they thought. This is who we are. So if you're a Native person in this community, what's your response? So for us, we're going, what the hell? This dream turned into a nightmare. Almost overnight.
So, you did a neon exhibit. I'll tell you that the first time I saw that exhibit, I didn't see it in person. I really wanted to. I wish I could have seen it in person. But the first time I saw it, I cried.
It still makes me angry. But I don't know if I can talk. That's what I mean by it was being there that I became politicized, because I realized the damage it causes our young people, because I was there with my 2 kids. And they couldn't leave the safety of my home without being exposed to this stuff in the community. So, I stopped painting because it didn't make sense to me. I was I am an accomplished painter, but I stopped painting being in this community because it didn't make sense to me.
That was a while ago. That was, we're looking, if that was in the early 90s.
Well, it was 88, 89 is kind of when I started to...
So 30 years ago. And so your exhibit was No to Red Sambo? Is that what it was?
Yeah, that was a recent iteration of that exhibit.
But that's, that was a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. That's over 25 years later that you're doing that. Mm-hmm. Was it something that you thought that took? Did it take that long to get to the point where you felt comfortable or strong, or was it the technique? Was it the artistic? Not, the idea was probably there for a while.
Oh, I've done work. This is a body of work that I've done for a long time. So, remember, I was there to get an MFA, and I did get my MFA. So, I started doing installation work as a graduate student. I didn't start using neon until maybe after I left there, but I was doing installation style work. So, and it was about what it was like to be in that community. So, I did a piece called The Good White Man, and it was just sort of trying to turn on its head, this whole use of another people's identity. My colleagues, George Flett, Bruce Wynn, after they saw the change, I'm like, what the hell, Shar, what are you doing? What are you doing these, Bruce used to call it constructions. Why are you doing these constructions? And I always thought it was kind of funny, because you can't explain that in a short little blip. I'm doing it because, but I did a show at Cheney Cole's museum. I can't remember, it was like 1994 maybe. It was called We the Invisible People. I really appreciated the opportunity to do something there. You go through the exhibit, the development of the city of Spokane. You would think that there was no Spokane people left, because we're always referred to in past tense. And then you go through, I don't know if you remember, you're so young, you might not have seen this exhibit. And then you come out the back end and you go, and there was this big mural of Lewis and Clark pointing to the Inland Empire. And of course, the Native people are always below the superior central figure. So Lewis and Clark are pointing to the first civilized men to look upon the Inland Empire. That's the title underneath the mural. So, that became kind of the idea behind We the Invisible People, because we were just not present, at all. So I created an installation there, and then I gave a talk, and George was way in the back. George Flett was way in the back, and I was giving my talk, and I talk about my personal history in terms of why I was doing this kind of work, and my mother was there. And when I do these lectures, I have a lot of my own subtle humor in it. Indian people get my humor, not always other folks, but my mother got really upset because people were laughing through my talk. And I'm going like, Mom, I'm telling jokes, they're supposed to laugh, But she's going like, they're supposed to be listening, And I sort of told my history, in terms of why this change in the kind of way that I approach art making. And so that's when George got it. And he, after my talk, he came up to the front and he goes, and he put in my hand 2 eagle feather earrings, silver earrings. He put them in my hand. He goes, I understand why you do this now. And I'm really happy that you're out there doing this and doing this for the people. So, that was really important, because my little group of artists who were my support system didn't really get it at first when I was doing installation style work. But Rick, was there. Rick, heard me talk. So all of those guys, who didn't get it before, because everybody else was still doing just paintings, they're doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. For me, it just didn't make sense. That's all. It was just, for me personally, didn't make sense for me at that time. So I started to do this body of work that is installation style, using earth, using neon, using different things, So what I'm trying to do in my installations is to try to get the viewer to feel what it is for us when we're in that environment. So that's usually what I'm trying to do, is flip it so that maybe they will get it. They will understand what it is to be a Native person in the 21st century. So.
Well, your choice of direction as far as your work goes is something that is, there are more Indian people that I see doing more of that kind of thing,
Yeah.
kind of following in that direction, and not so much the traditional style painting and things along that lines, which I think is something that's, a lot of it's really bold and in your face. And I think a lot of it's really necessary because there's so much untruths about Indian people. People think that, you said something earlier, and I just can't believe that. It's hard for me to think about this, because you talked about these sororities, and they're trying out for this squaw. My mom had one of her shuttle drivers from her assisted living facility came to pick her up one day, and she went to get on the shuttle. She was probably about 65 at the time, and he called her a squaw, and she was just like, oh my, couldn't even believe that that there's still people this day and age that are that oblivious to how offensive they are, and how it just doesn't ever. It seems like it's but I can understand if your entire university is perpetuating that mentality. I can see how they can feel. When you have 1,500, 2,000 students that all have that comfort. Mm-hmm. They feel comfortable with that type of mentality, that type of and I think, Margot talked today a little bit about the whole extinction thing. And I don't think that we realize how many people think that, and that's not just, I think that people think there are still some Cherokees around, or there's something like that.
At the beginning, when I challenged the use of the Indian mascot, I became targeted. So, what happened to me is hate crime, essentially, because my phone would not stop ringing. Every time I picked it up, it was a hate call, calling me all kinds of names, driving by my house, leaving stuff on my doorstep, putting stuff in my mailbox, going to the school, looking for my children, asking people to point them out. I became the target in this community of hate crime because I criticized the use of the mascot, and I did that because my children were being impacted by what was happening in the community. And so when I went to student government, because it was being debated, and I was there to represent my point of view, there was a student who was sitting next to me who looks at me and goes, "What's the big deal? Aren't all Indians dead?" And I guess he didn't recognize that I was the native student who was opposed to their use. And I couldn't believe it. I thought he was joking, but he was not joking. He goes, "What's the big deal? Aren't Indians all dead?" So however way they choose to portray Native people should be okay, essentially. So we have a lot of work to do, because I don't know if we've made a whole lot of progress 30 years later from what was happening then.
What makes you say that?
Because the quality of the debate has not improved. When we talk about how they see Native people, they see us as objects of curiosity, or objects of entertainment, or objects of study. They come across their bones and they study them. We're objects, of people who think we are spiritual, objects of fantasy. We're objects, we're not people. We're not full-fledged human beings.
So, in my in my experience, I've had racism, hate, I've had my fair share, but it wasn't at that consistency or level or depth. I didn't have people, making threats or, stalking my kids or anything along that lines to that, which I'm thankful for. Mm-hmm. My question to you is, with so much out there, and how do you stay strong through that? How do you not turn to drug abuse or alcohol abuse or any number of escapes from that? How do you stay there and fight that fight?
I shouldn't have, no. If I knew ahead of time what was there, I wouldn't have taken my kids there, and I wouldn't have gone there. Once I was there, I was thinking, what the hell, I need to get out of town, right? So in the midst of all those hate calls that I was getting, I was also the focus of a lot of media, negative media. Media can be used as a tool. And it was being used as a tool to make me look stupid and ridiculous, and so circumstances sometimes impact, what happens, Ken Stearns, who is a Jewish man who is working for the American Jewish Committee in New York City, was studying campuses across the country for incidences of hate crime, hate incidences of different kinds, and looking at the response of the administration. Because depending on their response, they can either make it worse, by not doing anything and it starts to grow, or they can do a lot to make the target of the incidences feel safer. So he was looking, and it was called Bigotry on Campuses. That was the study. So he was studying student newspapers, and he came across the articles on me. And as an expert on racism and anti-Semitism, he recognized racism when he saw it. So he's going like, what's going on here? So he calls me. And of course, all the hate calls start with, is this Charlene Teters? Yes, and then the hate comes. So of course he calls in the middle of all those hate calls, is this Charlene Teters? And I'm going like, yes. And so you just kind of brace yourself. And he goes, I'm Kenneth Stearns. He's now a dear friend. I'm Ken Stearns from the American Jewish Committee. And he tells me what he's doing. And he goes, it looks like you need some help, is what he said. I'm going like, yeah, I need some help here. So I just happened to be in a place at a particular time where it gained this great deal of momentum through other organizers coming to stand with me. In the same way that Standing Rock, became like a place where organizers came together.
And how long were you there? I mean, you talked about being from like 88 to maybe 91 or so. Mm-hmm. That, did you leave right after you were done with school?
Yep.
And then you came here?
I did not come here. When I was done there, I went to Washington, D.C. I worked with the National Congress of American Indians. They started getting calls from all over the country about their local definition of these racist mascots. And they're going like that. And that was Gay Kingman, who was the director at the time. Do you know her?
Yeah, I actually met her earlier this year. I interviewed her down at NIGA down in San Diego.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear her story about this. So when we landed on her doorstep over there, and that was my husband and I, and we're going like, hey, we're looking for work, looking for stuff to do. and she's going like, I know who you are. Because she'd also kind of, read about us, and we're getting all these calls, and of course I personally have an opinion, but I can't say that on behalf of NCAI until it goes through resolution as voted on by the members, right? So she gave us I says, I have no job for you, but I have a desk for you. There's a desk over there with a phone on it. You can use that fax machine over there. And, when we get those calls, we're going to refer them to you. And what I would like you to work on is presenting this before NCAI so that we can get a resolution. So when we get those phone calls, we can just say, yeah, this is our statement. So that's what I did. That's what we did. No money, but, we, from that place, we did get the phone calls, and we went out on the road. So they supported us, meaning NCAI, supported us doing some of this work kind of on the ground, So we were going from there to Kansas City Chiefs, to Atlanta Braves, to Cleveland Indians, the Washington Redskins. We were doing all of that work from that office. So we were organizing people in all over the place. So that's what I did after I finished my master's.
What was that like? That had to be just kind of crazy. I mean, I've gone all over and done all sorts of work in different cities, different towns, but that's like going into the lion's den.
Yeah.
Every time you go somewhere, you're targeting the lion's den.
Well, yeah, it was. And in Atlanta, I remember they had a SWAT team around us. We always were corralled, so they would have, barriers around us. And then they had SWAT team around us. I'm not sure who they were trying to protect, but they were they were there. So we would be doing this work. We're passing out stuff for people to read. This is why we're here. A lot of movement people came with us, and we're kind of frontline people doing the work. I remember in Kansas City, Dennis Banks and I negotiated a place for us to do our demonstrations. They, of course, agreed, okay, we'll let you demonstrate, but you're going to be way over there in that parking lot. So, way, way, way back there where all the fans will come in and nobody will see you, essentially, we're going like, no, we don't agree to that. We want this place right here. So we told them where we wanted to be. And they referred it to the grassy knoll, which is kind of funny. And then we're going like, yeah, we want the grassy knoll. And they're going like, no, we want you way back there. And they said, so they would, on their letterhead, they would say, by this time, we want you to agree to these terms that you're going to be over there, and we would let that deadline come and go. We just wouldn't agree to it. And they're going like, they'd call us up and they're going like, well, the deadline went by and we know. Says, well, how come? Because we're not agreeing. And we want this place over here. And they go, well, all right, if you do that, you'll be arrested. And I says, all right, arrest us then. So they're going like, no, wait, let's talk about this further. So, it went on several days like that where Dennis and I were negotiating with these guys that represented the team, the Kansas City Chiefs. And so we finally got to a place where we were almost ready to sign it. And we're going like, I'm really offended that the letterhead says Kansas City Chiefs on it. There's something really offensive about that. We want you to take Kansas City Chiefs off of it, and then we'll sign this agreement. So we got them to, they're going like, what? That's our, that's who we are. That's who we represent. So we got them to take their name off of the stationery, and then we signed it, and then we agreed to the grassy knoll, So it was interesting. We were right up front. All the fans got to go by us as we're demonstrating. We were in a corral again. I don't remember seeing any guns, but the Department of, who was it? It was Justice Department that was there. They were there, kind of watching to make sure that everything went okay. And then we were almost ready to go. And somebody comes to us and they go, "We got 4 tickets. Do you guys want them?" And we're going and so Clyde Belcourt goes, "Yeah, we want this." And he grabs those tickets. There's 4, I think 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 4 of them. And so he goes, "All right, so here's what we're going to do." So this is Clyde Belcourt. And he goes, and I'm getting ready to go. I'm getting ready to get in my car. And he goes, "Sharp, you're going with me?" And Don goes, my husband Don's like, "What? No, you're not going to take her in there." So we were going to go in. And I'm going well, okay, so let's do it. So we got 4 tickets. And Clyde Belcourt points to me. He goes, "We're going, Sharp, we're going in." And there was 2 students who were there from Haskell that were participating in the demonstration. So the 4 of us with our tickets went in, and we had one of our banners, and it was the banner was from here to that door, so really long banner that said, "American Indians are human beings, not mascots." So that's what that banner said. And so we got in there, and we sort of waited for what would be halftime. And so we're going okay. So we get up and we start to open up that banner. And as we get it open and you can start to see, people could see it from across the stadium. And as soon as they saw it, they started doing this, whoa, whoa. So, whoa, that chant that they all do, the tomahawk chop. Mm-hmm. So everywhere we went, the crowd was doing the tomahawk chop directed at us with the sign that said, "American Indians are human beings, not mascots." So as you could tell where we were in the stadium by the chant, because they were doing it at us, whoa, oh. Yeah, so they were doing that. So,
what was that like? Holy cow.
It was really frightening. The Justice Department, who sent, several guys, to kind of watch it, they're going "Oh my God, this was not part of the negotiations. Why are you in here?" It says, "Because we had 4 tickets." So they followed us around, and they turned. I've never seen white people turn gray, but they just turned gray. It's all the blood in their face just drained because they were so frightened that something was going to happen to us, So we went all the way around the stadium, and then we went out and rolled up our banner, put it in the car, and left. Wow. So yeah.
Well, that kind of brings me a couple other questions. One. So that was an era ago. That was a while ago that happened.
That would be probably be 92.
I remember hearing about this stuff. Mm-hmm. What is it like for you knowing that there's an entire generation of kids out there now that had no idea that any of that ever happened? Mm-hmm.
I don't know what people know. It's hard for me to put into context, what's different or what's I actually don't think that a lot of our IA students know who I am. Sometimes they go somewhere else for their master's or whatever, and I'm often a subject of a class lecture or something, and they're going "Oh my God, that's our dean." It's really funny. And they'll come back, "Oh my God, I had no idea." So they don't know me that way. They just know me as a dean for the most part, because I don't talk about my work, that kind of work. I need to write a book, and that's part of why I probably need to not be doing this job. Is there's so much. I mean, there's a documentary on me, but it's only about a particular time period. There's so much in my life, that I need to talk about and write about. So when I talked about that time period before I went to IA, I was in a dysfunctional marriage. I was living on the Colville Res, Rebecca Lake, and it was really isolated. And I painted all the time, but I became more and more kind of depressed, I guess. And, but I would forget to eat. I'd forget, to kind of take care of myself because I was really becoming more and more depressed. I started to and I would forget to eat. So it was like I was not purposely fasting, but I was fasting. There would be days where I would not eat or drink very much. And I started to have, these very vivid dreams. And one of those dreams, I was so small inside my body that I couldn't fill up my body. I was like this small inside my body, and I could look up into my body and I could see where light was coming through my eyes and, where my eyes would be and stuff. But I was so small. I was almost disappeared because I couldn't fill up my body, That was sort of the beginning of some really vivid dreams, where I'm visited by an eagle. It was a golden eagle that came to me and is talking to me. It was so vivid. And then, came talk to me, and then it went away. He flew away, and I watched him fly away. And then I looked in front of me, and his wing was in front of me. And I'm kind of like, and I picked it up, and it was still warm, and I was like holding it like this. I'm like, oh, I have all these eagle feathers. See, this is my thought process. Oh, I have all these eagle feathers. And it was still warm. And then he comes back, I see him coming back, and he goes, and I kind of put it to the side over here. And he goes, I've lost something, have you found it? And I'm going like, no. And I realize I have to give it to him. So I give him back his wing, and he pulls 3 plumes from his wing before he puts it all back on. And he goes, I can only remember, this is for war dancing. And I saw a human hand with the plume. And he goes, this is for war dancing. And then the other 2, I can't remember what they're for, but he told me what they were for, but in the dream, but I can't recall it. So that was kind of a turning point. That's when I decided to leave where I was. But, to me, that particular time period and that dream and that place I was in was a turning place, because it was, and I kept hearing my uncle's song, so it was a time where I knew I had work to do. I had things, and those plumes were these were my things I was supposed to do. I can only remember one now. It's war dancing. And then the other 2 I don't remember. So I feel like I'm on this journey that I'm doing those things that I was asked to do.
So it sounds like you found work that has purpose, and that you think that you're, and I feel the same way about a lot of the work that I do. I think that I'm supposed to be doing. I think it's work that should be done.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it takes to get it done. So I only have 2 more questions for you. One is, I didn't know a lot of the stories that you just shared with me. I had known briefly a little bit of them here and there. And I had read a little bit up on you. I don't like to try to stop, just kind of kind of weird sometimes if I know too much about people. So I try to let them share what they want to share with me. But my question is I've heard people call you a rock star. I've heard people tell me how inspiring you are in your work, and that they really admire the things that you've done. And it's mostly young Indian women. How does that make you feel, and what do you think about that?
It is a responsibility. I know that I have given hope to Native women, young women. I get an opportunity to travel, and almost everywhere on the front lines I see young Native women who have found I look at them and I think that they're really courageous, and they're beautiful, and they're powerful. And some have found a role model. They model themselves after me. So I know that I have a responsibility to always carry myself in a humble way. And as a grandmother now, when I'm asked to stand with them, and sometimes I'm being asked to stand in very dangerous places, but I feel like I don't feel anymore. I don't feel scared. I've had people tell me, how do you do it? But I don't know. I can't explain it. It's like somewhere along the line, I feel like the ancestors are with me, and I'm never really alone, So I believe that the ancestors do their work through us. They're doing their work through you, too.
I think I agree with a lot. I agree with what you say. I think that there's a lot more than I may ever know, or why I do, or how things happen. A lot of the things that I've been blessed to do aren't something that I could have planned or imagined or written, or all of these different things that it just seemed to me that when I started working with cameras and started working with Indian people, the doors just seemed to open. Whether I was ready for them or not, and I try to do as much as I can when I can. But if you knowing what you just told me about how you inspire, what would you say to Indian women that were maybe searching for their own path, or struggling with their own journey, or maybe in a not so good relationship? What would you say to them?
That's really a hard question because I think it takes a while to know what is the right thing to do. And you're doing the right thing when doors start to open up for you. And that we're not talking about being rich. It's not that kind of wealth. It's that you're okay and things are taken care of. That you're able to get what you need to do the work that you need to do. I feel like when you're doing the right thing, things happen. As soon as it's like when I had that dream and I went to Santa Fe, it was like things started to open up for me. The path became really clear. And I was told when I was hearing, sorry about that, my uncle's song, and that place that I was, where I was in sort of a dream place, I worried, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because you want an answer immediately, because we grow up in this Western world where we ask a question and the answer is this, right? We don't know the answers. Through our storytelling, there's different answers depending on what the situation is. So there's never one right answer. There's just the answer that's right for you at that time, right? So don't worry about it. You know, when you're ready, things become clear for you. So that's kind of the message that was given to me at that time. Don't worry. You will get what you need when you need it, and you will know what you need to do. That's a hard one. Because, we're used to, even mainstream education, here's the question and here's the answer, and you memorize that answer and you will get an A on that test or whatever. Within our culture, there's no right answer. So when you ask a question of the elders, they tell you a story. Because there is no one right answer. It's for you to decide what that answer is. So it's a different way of being, right? It's hard. It's actually hard to be Indian, right? It's hard to be who we are. You have to kind of trust that you're doing the right thing.